Splendid. Right, if you thought what you saw this morning was good, you ain't seen nothing yet. I have the most awesome panel. No panic, it's going to be fine to everybody. So my name is Jenny Mark-Evans. I actually run a company called Manor Marketing, but we are here today with NextGen BPS. We then have Phil from ITN, ITV, ITN.
Thank you. I'm on home turf.
And I'm really glad. That's because I'm trying to read that. I'm going to read this now. We have Phil Holdgate from ITV. Excellent. Thank you very much. We have Frank Andrews from Goltz. We have Brian Leonard from IMG. We have, I've got this in the wrong. I've completely messed this up. I'm terribly sorry. No, so you are actually John Malpass from Toyota. Then we have Brian Leonard from IMG. Finally, we have Darren Long, an independent consultant, but everybody will know him anyway. Right, so now that's over and done with. So after my ridiculous quick intro, I'd like them to actually tell us all what their sustainability role is or their interest in sustainability in their particular company. You're first.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So my role is sustainability. I'm head of production sustainability for ITV Studios. So we're a global producer, a collection of 63 different production companies in 13 countries. My remit is to turn our corporate climate strategy into meaningful, tangible change and evolving the way that we produce our shows in ways that are aligned to our net zero commitments.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm Frank Andrews from Goltz. We're a German-based company, and one of the things that we're doing as a construction manufacturer is we're preparing ourselves to transition towards net zero over the next 10 years or so. So we're ensuring that we're producing products which are sustainable moving forward. And what's been great is that a lot of the construction build products are actually useful in your industry as well.
Okay, afternoon. So it's John Malpass. I work for Toyota, the car maker, and I'm responsible for the last 10 years anyway, for decarbonising the manufacturing operations in the UK and in Europe, and also for developing the circular economy for the vehicle manufacturing and products.
I'm Brian Leonard. I work at IMG Studios. We're not fortunate enough to have our own sustainability officer, but I'm probably part of a team of 10 individuals who are just keen to make a difference. And I look at the technical television side of what IMG does.
My name's Darren Long. I'm a media consultant and worked in the industry a very long time. This has always been a really important subject for me and one that I'm absolutely passionate about. And so today it's going to be good to hear and debate about this. And certainly some of the companies, there's always the production people that slightly push back sometimes around doing some of this stuff.
So we are going to have a very engaging conversation here, but we really encourage lots of questions from the audience as well. So please join in as well, because this is for you as well. We're all here to kind of learn and be involved. So I'm going to start with a slightly controversial thing, and that's the phrase greenwashing. So because we all want to do the right thing, we all think we're doing the right thing, but how exactly does it really work in the real world? I'm just going to keep going around like this.
Wow, nice easy one to start with. Thank you.
That's fine, my pleasure.
I think it's a really interesting topic. Actually, I think it's good to tackle it head on as well. I think where we were just even a few years ago, our knowledge and our understanding has just gone, up several magnitudes, which is a really good thing. But if people are still in that same mindset that we were in even 3-4 years ago, you're at risk of being accused of greenwashing. It's a very sort of real world place that we're in right now. But also, just to recognise, it's a very complex topic that we're talking about. There's a lot of things that need to change in order for us to become truly sustainable, and that's going to take a long time to get there. So whilst you need to be mindful not to be too critical, I think, of people who are trying to do good things. Not quite. Somebody just fell over at the back. Hope you're okay. Then don't be too critical of people trying to do good things and putting the effort in. But maybe as a learning exercise that, and we're all on a bit of a learning curve myself included. It's new, it's different, and we shouldn't be overly critical of that. But also, we need to be very mindful that you're not being lured into something that isn't really genuine either. So it's a really fascinating topic.
I'm actually going to change this because, John, with Toyota, when we were having a chat before, your role's actually been this for the last 10 years, which I was like, sorry, did you say 10 years? Because for us, we're almost beginning to want to do it. So following on from that, I'm interested in your view as well.
I always felt that greenwashing was a relatively recent phenomenon as the sort of climate debate and the environment debate got much more prolific and discussions. People saw it as an opportunity to sell a product or sell a service. And therefore, they're saying things to customers or potential customers like, buy this service, buy this product because environmentally it's better than the competition. But sometimes the facts weren't exactly either true, maybe, or if you looked at the facts, maybe you'd interpret them slightly differently. In fact, it might be correct, but maybe there's a small print that you have to read as well. And I think that's the danger. I think for me, it's all around facts. And my experience is we never say we've done something unless you've proved you've done it and it's been sustained. And the most important thing is sustained. So we like to do things which have been proven over a period of time and it's repeatable. And then you can share what you've done, whatever it may be.
Splendid. So Frank, you're actually producing some products that, obviously we sell here as Next Gen BPS as well. But I'm interested in your version of that as well.
Well, I think what we're seeing is, I think Phil touched it as well, both touched it really, is that the technology's improved a lot over the last few years. So we're actually getting to a point now where products are actually genuinely renewable or moving towards it. I think it's important to not be too critical of people, as you say, that were trying to do the right thing in the past, but I think we're now getting to a point where the technology's caught up with that and we can be a bit more clear. And I think, exactly as you say, we've got data, we can see what really is sustainable, what really is actually making a positive impact. And some of that comes down to technology and also to legislation, because people that were putting a green leaf on a product and saying it was green are now being pushed out because they're being found out.
Right.
So, yeah, the technology and the legislation have caught up.
Okay, Darren, because obviously some of the stuff that you've got, I wonder if you've got any data that actually backs up what we was just talking about there.
From a data point of view, I think this is one of the hardest things that if you look at our industry and compare it against, let's say, a manufacturing industry where you can rigid and know what you're going to do from a cost point of view and from an environment point of view and repeat that time and time again. I think when it comes to productions, this has always been one of the hardest areas to focus on. Number one, I don't think probably anyone in the room who won't agree, we've got to be sustainable. But number two, it's like, well, what does that actually mean? And how much is it actually going to cost? And what's the actual benefit? And that's the education bit which we still struggle with. And then you look at the complexities of our organisations and how they all link together and try and capture all that information so that there's something tangible that our production teams and our people within our various different companies can actually understand. And I think when you look at cost and you look at benefit and you look at education, those are the things that we still haven't got right. If I look at probably somebody from manufacturing Toyota, I can imagine that can be really thought through and repeated.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we can't do that, but we need to build tools and education and just recognise that this is something we have to do. End of. Like health and safety is something we have to do. So it should be built in, not at the back end, which is always the frustrating thing. It needs to be at the front end of every single production we do. And so it's really trying to educate our staff so that you don't just impose it on them. Here's a water bottle, that'll save the planet. Everyone goes, really? So it's that education. So from a data point of view, I think it's one of the key things that we need to start working out. Great software, great education, and truly how much is it saving both the planet, but also the company, and also benefiting me as an individual, as a customer.
Brilliant, thank you. So, Brian, as IMG, with what you're trying to do, and you're obviously one of these customers that Darren was just chatting about. So, what are you doing?
I think there's an element of the first thing I've done is accepted I'm a hypocrite. So whether that is greenwashing, I don't know, but I think anybody in the Western world is perceived as a hypocrite because whatever we try to do, someone can turn around and say, you're not doing enough.
Right.
So you have that problem that you have to face. And you get into a stage now where I've also accepted life's not fair in the grand scheme of things. So when you compare company against company,
Yeah.
it's very tough to necessarily gauge how serious they are when they're trying to do their best. So there's an element of, I think the big thing for the media industry potentially in the long run is going to be, with our skill set and with our capability, producing content that shows green initiatives being used. That's probably our biggest strength, and it's probably, we keep on beating ourselves up of how much power we're using, but there's a part of me that thinks maybe the future is we produce content that gets seen globally, and that has an influence. So I don't even know if carbon offsetting for us, as an example, will be, you'll be given a credit for every time you mention the word sustainability.
Right.
And because if you went to a group of lawyers and said, I tell you what, let's worry about the power of your building, they would say this is a waste of time. Their job would be to make it easier for us to all bring in legal legislation to make our lives easier from that front.
Right.
So as much as it is important to reduce the carbon, I can't win. And I've accepted I can't win, but that doesn't mean I don't try. And so that's where we're sort of at a position.
Okay, you're right.
If I could just chime
No,
in, I really
please.
like that honesty as well. And
Yeah.
I think and that kind of reflects the emerging theme of green hushing, which is just as damaging, right?
Absolutely.
So some brilliant people doing amazing things, but we are, as an industry, just completely awash with NDAs, and people don't want to put their head above the parapet, and we can't share all these amazing things that are happening. And that I think that's almost just as bad and damaging as greenwashing.
And we all try and do. I mean, I fly, so, and it's like tick this button for sort of, some carbon offsets, so I do that. But what does it really mean? I'm not actually even planting a tree or something like that. And I'm driving an electric car that hates this weather. It's just, my battery and everything else is going. So we're all trying to do the right thing, and that's an element of greenwashing or green hushing as well.
So why did you buy an electric car?
Why did I? To be honest, I bought it because for the first time in about 20 years, I've now got a company car. It was good BIK. It was really that simple. But there is a bit that I feel I'm doing the right thing, but my husband has a hybrid car. We couldn't actually rely just on an electric car.
And I think that's the thing, which is, we all know probably the biggest driver, certainly in production, is how do I save cost? And,
Yeah.
I'm as much a hypocrite as you are, but I believe in doing the right thing, as you do. And it's just trying to translate that, doing the right thing, but you're a hypocrite because actually you're saving cost. And so, okay, is it doing the right thing or is it just saving cost? So it's trying to get that message over, and I'm sure you, within ITV, constantly have to try and justify the reasons why somebody should use something which is environmental, opposed to just doing the same thing as they've always done because that's the way they've done it.
But it's the classic financial versus optics versus real world, actually. So let's take that one for a spin.
So from my perspective, and again, I understand what everybody's saying, but when I go and make the case for sustainability reasons for changing all the bulbs, it's not sexy. It's not, no one cares. And I can give you the case study that shows in 1.7 years, we're going to make a return on our investment. And the return on the investment is going to, well, if it's sexier to go and buy a new Vision mixer and do stuff that's a little bit wacky and interesting. So I fight against that. Even when I turn around to management and say, we can make potential savings here, the potential for growth in other areas sometimes outweighs that potential savings. And so I think the government is probably where it's going to be led, and people like ITV, BBC, influencing. The power that you guys have is unbelievable because everybody else is following. And I say they're following, and they're following on the sustainability, because while companies like us and other companies can go and do different things, it will be when we start losing work. I don't think we've lost any work for sustainability reasons. And I'm sort of hopeful at some stage we'd start losing. Yeah, I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but that's where,
but the rest
to
of
make
us,
the
there's
change.
the perceived that we need to have this sustainability policy, framework agreements, and then we've got an opportunity to be part of a tender. So that's what we're led to believe. I don't know if anybody watched, we didn't talk about this before, was the Panorama show actually on Monday, which was about electric bikes. And it was quite interesting, but it ended up being really negative because basically the criminals are using this to swipe stuff. So the whole thing about electric bikes or scooters or whatever else was completely overshadowed by something else. But I'm still interested in views on the optics of financial versus the real world. So
I think for me, we look ahead. If you're looking at, say, decarbonisation of your products, of your factories, we look ahead and we have like cost curves or what it may be. So just to give you a couple of examples, if you were to convert one of our factories to green hydrogen, it'll cost about 100 million. If you were to put heat pumps on our paint supply houses, which really spray the cars, it'll be 30 million. So when you add it all up, it's a huge cost. But at the same time, we have to deliver the quality for the customer, and we've got to deliver the cost for the customer.
Yes.
And those targets are always tightening,
Yeah.
etc. So the worst thing is to wait. If you wait, the costs will more than likely get bigger in the future because everyone will be transitioning at the same time, potentially. So our strategy is to accelerate at pace the decarbonisation at the least cost, and we do it in two ways. We call it slim and simple, but it's basically compaction. We make everything smaller. And an example would be we have paint booths which were 80 metres long to spray a car, and today they're 15 metres.
Wow.
So the energy is much less. And that sort of 70 or 80% reduction in energy is done at the investment cost of £400 per tonne of CO2. If you were to put the heat pump in, it's £3,500 per tonne of CO2.
right.
So we're not going to wait and adopt heat pumps at a later stage. We're trying to figure out how to compact.
Yeah.
And the second thing then is, in our strategy, is to switch away from grid and go off grid because it's always cheaper and greener, and you expand your renewables to do that. That's exactly what we're doing. That reduces your cost base, improves your cash flow, and then you're letting the technology develop at a price you can adopt them in the future. So my advice is don't wait. Accelerate as quick as you can. Same for logistics. You look at all the different ways to compact logistics, orientation of parts and vehicles and equipment, etc., to maximise that efficiency and reduce the logistics kilowatt hour per mile.
Frank? what do
Yeah,
you-
so you say change your operational way of doing things and to move and to transition to it now is probably the best way we could do that. And that's sort of the message that the construction industry, a lot like your industry, has financial constraints and it has real world budgets that it has to work to. Changing the way you operate now in small ways will help you as we move towards it, because this is coming. You know, what the government wants to do across the country, be carbon zero by 2050. They're pushing certain industries, certainly like construction where we're in, they're trying to bring that forward because they know it's very important. And they look at the 2020s as an important time. We're starting to already see things that people would traditionally use in their operations, like small diesel generators, petrol generators, being moved out. And the cost to use the alternatives, like grid power being bought out and this, that, and the other, that's already very high. So if you're not starting to make these small steps and changes in the way that you operate now, you're going to suddenly start to find that you've got aging kit that you've not been transitioning across to the newer stuff, and you're going to have a very big bill at a time when you quite rightly say everybody's going to be trying to transition immediately, and there'll be too much demand, prices will be higher, and you were left behind.
But a lot of it is if you're, say, the upper management or the powers that be, whatever we want to call them, if they don't believe in it or if they have a passion for it or their bottom line, then, you know, that's going to be a really, really tough hill to climb. So, Phil, I'm interested because obviously that's part of, you know, your role and what you do.
Absolutely. And I was 20 years. I was a production accountant as well, so I'm always mindful
real
of
bean counter.
That's
Excel spreadsheets.
this exactly. I love spreadsheets. Anyone will know. Who knows so I think for me the sweet spot is where you get the opportunity to do both. You can save a little bit of money, or at least be cost neutral. But you're also making the ethical choice as well. That you know we need to transform the way that we produce shows. But invariably, where we get solutions that are genuinely sustainable, they tend to be pretty much cost neutral. We've even had instances where we save money as well. So I do get a bit frustrated. I get asked that question a lot: who's going to pay to go green, kind of thing.
Right.
I always query: are we setting ourselves up to fail at the minute because we haven't really evolved our budgeting processes? Who budgets for sustainable solutions? Not many productions at the minute. So I think there's a bit of a reskilling effort required. I think there is a genuine cost around like retooling the industry. So, you know, we need generator providers to be thinking about investing predominantly in battery technology. But there are some fuel savings to be had as well. So it's paying one thing off against the other. So I do push back to an extent when we talk about finance. But I like to think I'm coming at that from a bit of an informed position as well.
Okay. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the hardest things, and certainly even in a previous role I had at Warner, was we were moving everyone into cloud production. So absolutely everything from galleries to the edit suites and everything we did was cloud production. Now, the difficulty for people is understanding what that really means, because most of the time it's like, oh God, you know, is it really going to save me anything? You know, but I think we need to push past that. We talk about education. That's going to be the most important thing. We don't educate our staff. We educate the people senior in the business, the next people down, and maybe the production managers and people who have to directly work with the budgets. But people who in the business really want to understand it as well, because they then will understand the reasons why we're sending them across the road to Westworks to do remote production, rather than actually we're sending them into studios or OBs where we traditionally do that.
Right.
And the benefits are a number of things. Yes, it's maybe cost neutral, and who cares about that? That's cost neutral, but there's other benefits on top, which is, number one, they're not travelling up and down the motorway. Number two, you can use the same people for, you know, the same role. Yes, they think, okay, I'm being worked harder, but they're not, because actually they got a quality of life. And number two, you can use the equipment, so you're not buying as much equipment, which means that you're actually saving there. So there's a number of benefits that supersede just the environment side of it, which is the most important, but it all comes into that funnel. So the key thing for this industry, and it's really important, I think if you ask any customer who watches TV and at the end of it says, this was done with Albert, no one would know. No one understands what that means.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, that's great. What does that logo mean? It's like putting a CE mark on a piece of product. It doesn't mean anything. So until we start really educating everyone, from our customers to our staff to our senior leaders, and actually just not focusing just on, you know, well, you know, it's going to be more costly if we put a load of light bulbs in. You know, it's a case of we have to do this. It's fundamental. And I think the construction industry is a classic one. They're going to have to do it because health and safety say you shouldn't run a generator inside. So that's going to be mandatory, and that'll push it on. Our industry needs to change as well. We have to change. And the only way to change is we all have a responsibility to start educating. So I'm looking at you. I hope ITV are going to be the best educated people, because that's how you'll drive change in the business.
I think the Albert kite mark at the end slowly educated the industry. Of people in the industry was like, what's that? And then there was a personal pride of, well, we should have that as well. And I think the personal pride for representing your own company to get that kite mark I suppose it forced us in some ways of educating our entire staff, and talking to Albert then educated us in, right, we need to have our own policy. And it was amazing how just that pride of that kite mark at the end forced us as a company to do 3 or 4 things that potentially are going to put us in good stead for the future.
And that's really good. And I think that should be moved on further. It's just, I worry sometimes, we started with the greenwashing, is it a tick box?
I think it is, but it's a tick box I have with pride, purely because I'm doing something rather than doing nothing. If I sat here and worried about being called, I'm not saying you're calling me a hypocrite,
no, I never.
but if I sat here and worried about that, it'll do nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm always happy to do something rather than nothing.
No, and I agree.
And I don't think anybody's doing nothing,
no.
You know, in the grand scheme of things.
That's really important. You have to do something, and you have to start somewhere. And I always remember when I was told 10 years ago, my area was going to be the first to be net zero by 2040. My MD turned around and he says, use your brains, don't spend the money. And that's become part of our philosophy, use brains, not spend money. And it's quite a useful thing, because most people think you have to spend your way out of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you just got to think smarter.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you start thinking about, well, how do I think smarter? And then you look at the people around you and say, well, they all look like me, they all sound like me, and they all do everything like me. And there's one of your big problems, is the sort of diversity you got in your organisation you have to have young people in there. You have to have a diverse mix, people, women, different ethnic backgrounds, because they all think slightly differently, because their cultures are all slightly differently, and they come up with different solutions. And we use them as disruptors, because the organisation has developed one way, and we now know to solve all these big problems, not just decarbonisation, there's many big problems. We need to have disruptors in there, people who think differently, and people who are much more digital focused.
And they show it.
They show
I
it
think
in the
they're
passion.
doing it
The most
and
important,
showing it.
it's very, very
Yeah.
important, is you've got to give people the freedom. The worst thing you can say to someone is a negative response to something they want to do, because then you'll turn people off. It's important to encourage, promote, let them make mistakes, but just keep going, and then they'll get the recognition, which is important, and the rewards, because you have to sustain. Decarbonisation is a little bit different because it's the long term. It's a transition over 20 years, 25 years. You've got to sustain that within the company and keep people going.
But I think that's one of the key things on education. What do all these different terms mean in a way? Kind of like, your carbon footprint versus net zero. It's talked all the time, but what's the sort of, to the average man in the street, what does that really mean? And what can they do? And, how is it relevant to them? Phil, go on.
Yeah.
You haven't spoken for a while.
I was just going to chime in. I didn't want to
excellent.
take someone else's turn. I completely agree. I think there's a translation requirement because it is we can get a little bit like alphabet soup with some of the acronyms that float around. I said it previously. It's a really complex topic. So how do you break it down into meaningful language that meets people where they're at and is relevant for them as well? And just thinking back to ITV Studios and our climate action strategy, culture is right at the heart of it, and we've literally got a visualization. It's like a hub and spoke model. So we've got a load of technical innovation that spills out from it, but right at the heart of it is people. And I think that's really relevant, probably for a lot of industries, but especially for ours. We're a people-based industry, we're a relationship-based industry, so getting the culture piece right is absolutely fundamental to meaningful change, because we're asking people to do things differently.
Totally.
I think as a species, we don't really like that. It's like we're very comfortable with what works and what we trust and what we rely on. So breaking out of that and trying new things and new ways of working absolutely relies on people and getting the culture piece right.
Okay, so if you could have a crystal ball and you could have anything you want, what is the one thing that you would like to see or do differently? Sustainability is the topic, I'm afraid. We'll start with you, Darren.
Well, I think what I don't want, and it's a bit like where we started with health and safety, is it became an afterthought. We'll do the production, then we'll work out what the health and safety is. I think everything we do going forward should be thinking about, okay, so we want to do that project, or we want to do that production, or we want to do that thing, and it should just be part of that process, and it should be built in and embedded. So everyone educated within the production team knows it, they understand it, they know why we're doing it. They don't suddenly think, well, it's just because the company wants to make more money. It's because it's the right thing to do. And we only need to see the news this week. We know it's the right thing to do. We all believe it's the right thing to do. But my crystal ball and my hope is once we've educated people and we've got the great ways to collect that information that we can demonstrate and it's repeatable, like was just being mentioned, then I would hope that that snowball will gather. People will believe that it's the right thing, and actually the snowball will just keep gathering. And like Brian basically said, that I know I'm doing the right thing. It might be a small thing, but it's the right thing. Stop worrying about China polluting the world. Focus on what we're doing in our own backyard. And the other thing is, we are a communication industry, and sometimes we're the worst communicators in the world. So actually, the other thing as a crystal ball is, I hope as education, we also educate effectively all our viewers and actually get them understanding why we're doing things differently and why they should be.
So I've got a bit of a gripe with the different bodies that are out there. So Albert, DPP, UNICEF. I feel like it feels like a money-making scheme, and there's a part of me that if I put a load of effort in one company to get the level of sustainability award that says we've done this job, I want that to be transferable across all of the other bodies. Right? So if we work with the Albert and we said, yeah, we're this and we've got that, then I don't need to go to the DPP and get the same body. I should be able to be basically given that one flag, because I just see another company, and a company like IBM, I think their product for showing, monitoring, and trying to basically give us all on the same playing field to some degree would be my wish if I could have one.
Nice.
I don't want to put a damper on it, but
Please, we're being honest here.
after 2035, I probably won't be here. So it's not my problem. And that's a fact. It's probably the next generation's problem, the sort of 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are coming through. So picking up Darren's point, it's all about, for me, I see myself not as a manager, my job is a coach. I coach people to develop them, to make them better people, basically, in themselves and what they do and what they produce. And for me, it's about transferring the knowledge and the information onto that next generation is the most important thing, and give them the platform to accelerate as quickly as they can to solve some of these problems. And the second thing is we've got some very highly skilled people, because we've been doing this for decades, and we now go into other organisations and companies. We have a special group who support them to take what we have and copy and show them how they can innovate and look for things and take their pathway for sustainability and decarbonisation as quickly as possible, because it will all happen at some point to everyone.
I wish I said make people better.
You did.
I think what I'd like to see, if I had a wish for the future, I'd like to see everybody being mindful of making operational changes and changing the way that we behave and the way that we operate in things. And coming from the construction industry, what health and safety's come up quite a few times, and that's something that's massively changed the way people in the construction industry complete jobs, complete tasks. Time and motion studies. Do I need two people to do this? Do I need to be there? Do I need to physically go there? Also, what type of energy draw am I using?
Right.
Is there something I can do to be clever? Do I need to use this really heavy draw, juicy equipment? Is there another way to do it? And I think really, going to your point, is the next generation really that's going to do that? I can only really talk about the construction industry that I've worked in for a long time. It's very much a conservative industry, and people will continue to do the same things again and again and again, because that's how we do it. And until you break that cycle, really, you'll always keep trying to do that, and you'll always try to find ways to power or to do or to move people around that are high cost, that will give you a high carbon footprint. So rather than people's just behaviours just remain exactly the same and everyone scrabble around to build technology to do it lighter, yes, things like light bulbs and things like that have come a long way, and this, that and the other. I think really it is about everybody taking some responsibility and looking at the way we operate at a time study motion. Could we do something better? And then manufacturers like us will meet you halfway and we will give you the power of the equipment to do that. But it's not just a case of want to carry on doing anything exactly as I've always done it and expect to be able to do it in a different way.
So the easy answer is a massive check. So we can pay for some good stuff to happen, but that's cheating. What I'd like to see is probably a little bit more consistency across the industry, depending on where I'm on the production side, and when you get a show commissioned, you're kind of getting a bit of a different message depending on who's commissioned your show, and I think that's a little bit, it's not done on purpose, and it's not done for the wrong reasons, because everyone's trying to get to the same end point. But it's also a little bit confusing, so that lack of consistency, I think is quite an easy win, but would actually go quite a long way. And I'd like to see a point where we get to maybe a little bit more policy aligning around, the use. At some point, could we phase out or completely stop the end of the practice of burning diesel for generators, for example, or how a bit of a quota for electric vehicles, something like that. So you're getting genuine leadership, but it's quite consistent, and it's slightly less confusing for what's already a very confusing topic.
Right, well, this has been quite incredible. We've covered quite a lot here. So, opening it up to you lot, are there any questions? I need at least one question. Excellent. Sorry, there is actually a mic.
Coming round
No, not at all, just so that we can hear your
Hello,
question
hello,
as well.
hello. myself heard. This is a question to the non-TV people, so Frank and John. You know, when we are working within commercial budgets, you know, commercial budgets are quite an easy and explicit tool. We know we've spent too much money. Carbon-wise, though, John, you mentioned you're kind of heading towards net zero for 2040. But in the shorter term, are either of you using tools in a way to ensure that you're staying within the parameters of your kind of short-term carbon targets? Are you setting yourselves carbon budgets in any way? How are you kind of ensuring that you're meeting those kind of carbon maybe targets you're setting yourselves?
Well,
First.
yeah, well, we have targets. It has to be net zero by 2040, and we can have a debate about what net zero actually means. But for us, it's get to the lowest possible CO2 emission you can for manufacturing, same for vehicles, if you like. To get there, we do it on a 5-year budget cycle. So we've just set the targets for the next 5 years to 2030. And when we do that, we look at all sorts of things, technology readiness, everything. Well, there's a huge debate within Toyota about what technologies we can adopt in each factory, for example, and how you roll out certain vehicles and when you sort of roll out certain vehicles to get that CO2 reduction. We do that. The second thing we do is we cap budgets for carbon. The reason why is, you know, we have budgets which are billions in Europe, and everyone wants money. And if you've got a priority which is decarbonisation and you need money, you've got to be careful you've got enough to get to net zero. So we cap the budget and we split it out by area, if you like, by manufacturing facility and product development, etc. So that's the other thing we do. And then the second thing we do is we build in the carbon cost into the investment decisions. We do that based on the market cost. And then the second thing we're thinking of doing is setting a higher, potentially higher internal carbon cost to drive it and accelerate the activity more. So there's lots of tools you need to get to net zero. Technology is one, finance is one, human resources is one, digitisation is one. And we've got that all mapped out for as far as we can see. But it's changing all the time, and we check it every year. The strategy is right, what new things are happening, what's happening in the digital sphere, how do we adopt that. There's a lot of activity in digital twinning, big data analytics, machine learning to drive down carbon. And some of that's quite complex, and you're doing that with universities and things. So we're developing microburners. We've got technology developments in all our regions around the world. And we're in the UK, we're focused on microburners and thermal battery storage systems with universities and things. So you've got to map it all out. How are you going to get there? It's a big problem, and you've got to break down the big problem into lots of small problems and give the small problems to people to tackle. Otherwise, you'll get nowhere. It is a big problem.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
From the Goltz Group's point of view, we're obviously a far smaller organisation, as big as we are in construction, manufacture. So for us, it's a lot of practical steps as we work towards. So shortening our supply chain, trying to centralise things closer to where we're actually going to be selling them. So we've got multiple areas where we can service manufacture, so things aren't being flown around the world as much as possible. Phasing, you know, we make a lot of petrol engines because that's what's available now. So we're phasing that and moving across to wherever possible, putting in batteries to replace these engines with a similar power so people can still do that. So practical things like that, obviously very important. But what the company did was to look at how quickly we could put something into market in a certain way, or whether we develop it and make it truly sustainable, delaying releases, delaying revenue return on these products by saying, no, we want it to be solar chargeable, we want it to be as close to 100% recyclable as possible. So within the company, the ethos is very much a case of small changes wherever possible, shortening supply chains, shortening moving things around the world as far as possible, and making sure when we do launch something, it's not landfill in 2 years' time. Mm. So making sure it's built in an industrial way, because it's very easy to have disposable product which has got a green sticker on it, but actually it's landfill in a very short amount of time. So what we produce, coming from a construction background, is it's got to be tough, it's got to be durable, and it's got to be sitting in somebody's warehouse in 20 years' time, still operating. So things like that. But in terms of an organisation like Toyota, we simply don't have those departments to do that. So it's small changes to get to where we need to be.
Thank you.
The interesting thing about small changes is we do a lot of analysis on small changes, and we use a phrase called 1 second, 1 watt, 1 drop, 1 gram. Reason why is because everyone understands those things generally. And if you add up all the small changes we do by all the people, the CO2 reduction, the energy reduction is bigger than the investments, those big investments we make over time. So we use this phrase called use your brains, not money. And that's right throughout the organisation, because it allows all those people that work for you, not the top people, directors and things who are looking at the bigger decisions, but everyone else to sort of focus on something. And all those little changes make a massive, massive difference. And you'd be surprised what people come up with that has never been thought before.
Yeah.
People on the shop floor who work on the production line, just little tiny tweaks to material applications make huge savings.
And I like that a lot,
Yeah.
and I like it a lot because you can apply it to the sports industry. You know, we all remember Team Sky, the marginal gains, and I think it's those marginal gains is the one thing which I hope we adopt much more of, which is everyone believes a small thing like changing light bulbs isn't worth it, but if we all adopt it, it is worth it. So to your point, I think it's a really important point, which is we should be doing it. And even the small things we should be doing. And I like the idea you mentioned earlier as well around ensuring that you ring fence effectively the carbon offset so you can actually have a budget or a reason to do it. So again, marginal gains and ensuring it's built into what your production budget is rather than an afterthought, I think it's super important.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes.
My question is for the broadcast people, just to keep it balanced. But Phil, you were saying that you wanted there to be some consistency within the production people that you work with. But are you able to offer any transparency around the criteria that you have at ITV and also at IMG as well?
Yeah, short answer is no, because I don't work for the commissioning side of the budget, sort of the business. But the slightly longer answer is that I think it's an ever-evolving conversation. My point was it's inconsistent at the minute, and that's unhelpful when you're trying to give clarity.
But you must have your own standards, though, right?
Yeah,
that you're looking
of course.
to adhere to.
And that's also balancing out with umpteen different requirements, so accessibility, D&I requirements, etc. So it's trying to cut through lots and lots of deliverable criteria for producers and just say, look, these are the things that are really important. And I completely agree with the other gents around the small things, marginal gains. There's also some really big ticket items that can move the dial quite quickly as well. So I'd like to see a little bit more clarity around that's what we're actually after. And those are the things I think we could do with a little bit of consistency on. Yeah.
It's extremely tough is the honest answer. I suppose there's an element of we've encouraged productions to put a certain percentage for sustainability and potentially offsetting in the future to get them educated in that this is coming. So that's one of the things we do. And the frustrating thing from my perspective right at this moment in time is I feel we've caught all of the low-hanging fruit. And this is a problem for us now because when we now have the quarterly meetings saying, what are you doing as a department, it's getting harder and harder to necessarily come with something that you can say, yeah, we're proud of this, because a lot of the things we want to do to make the biggest change still does require capital investment. And so there's an element of that's a problem we face, but it's still trying to necessarily change mindsets, bring people along. Yeah, when we tried to remove beef from the canteen, the world went mental. It was like I'd offered to kill one of their children to supply the beef. It was horrific. And when the education came along, all of a sudden it was easier. And people appreciated, all right, I'll have a chicken burger instead of a beef burger. So the education does help. And that education and monitoring are the two things we need to be better at. And when we was monitoring 2-3 years ago, our monitoring's changed now, so we're even better at what we're monitoring. But it's not easy, is the honest answer.
Any other questions? Right, well, thank you. Oh, sorry, there is a question. Is that another hand up? Thank you.
Sorry. So in Scripted, it's a little bit more of a kind of used and consumed environment, and we don't have that fantastic umbrella that you all have of this sort of big overarching company that has a timeline and processes that you can roll out over 5 years. For example, the last show that I did, we shot for 14 weeks. And so when you compress the timeline, sustainability becomes a really, really difficult thing to achieve. And no matter how much you want it to be the focus, it's really hard to make it a primary focus when you have all the other chaos happening in the background as well of what's happening in real time. So I guess my question is, sustainability for me within the industry at the moment feels undemocratic.
Yeah.
It feels like it works and is a talking point and focal point when we are talking about it at this level. But actually, the practical rollout for my experience within my role is really challenging. And I'm yet to, be honest, join a conference or a panel where we address that. And I'll give you a really good example. We use a lot of hired vehicles. That's part and parcel of our process, our daily process. But they are hired to us via service providers and freelancers who are outside of a jurisdiction of a company. So I cannot dictate to that person that they should sell their company equipment as they have it, which might be diesel run, and tell them that they have to migrate to an EV vehicle in order for me, because I'm essentially passing on a cost.
Right.
So I guess it's a bit of a broad question, but at some point, in order for us to become carbon neutral within ITV as an overarching company, we need to try and find a way to close that gap. And
Back to
I'm
policies
wondering,
again as well.
I'm wondering when we start talking about it on that level.
You'd be amazed the power you have just by asking the question. Because you asked the
I'm
question.
asking the question.
No. But when you ask the question to a freelancer, you'll put the fear of God into them that, oh Christ, I've been asked about electric car again. I've been asked about electric car again. They might not have the time scale to make that big capital investment, but when they do come to making that decision, they'll think in the back of their minds, right, I should have chose a green car. And that gives you the capability of, even though you might keep on asking, it's slowly getting in the back of their mind to make that change and make that difference.
And I think you're absolutely right, but it's not real time. That's over months and months, right? So someone's not going to sell a perfectly usable vehicle that's making them revenue and a living in that moment until they need to. So it's like you're in that...
But that's where I accept we're not in a perfect world. We're not in a fair world. And I've accepted that because our constraints and our limitations are different to everybody else's.
Yeah.
And if I could just add to that, I mean, look, it's really hard, and I 100% get it. I've been there. I understand that the pressures. But, you know, we went through a transition once where we told everyone they had to change over to a particular type of camera many years ago. Obviously, understandably, that was a cost to those individuals. But what we did is we took responsibility for that. In other words, we set up a fund within our own organisation that made that cheaper. So actually, the reason to change was a benefit to them as well, because actually they got a benefit by buying the cameras through us, because actually they got a discount on it. I think we have to, and I think it's sitting down and educating, and it's working with procurement, and it's working with production teams to say what's the art of the possible. Not when the production is just about to happen, that's too late, but now, when the productions are not happening, when you can have a few minutes to sit down with teams and start working out, how could we do this in the future? Is there a way? Is there a benefit? Would ITV pay for this amount of money, or whatever it may be, to achieve those things? And even if you get 2 out of the 8, let's say freelancers to do that, that's a benefit and that's a gain. So I think I hear what you're saying, but I think doing nothing because it's too difficult is wrong. But equally, I think I understand fully that you can't change everything. And it's impossible. And
Surely
you've
there'd
just
be a
got to
bit of a
accept that.
danger as well. You almost could have a tier system, especially with freelancers that are kind of green certified and not. And then, then that's a very,
Yeah.
that's dodgy.
If I can just respond to what
Yeah.
you're saying, sorry, I feel like we could do this all day. But
No, it's good.
Oh God, okay. We do make as many changes as we can.
Yeah.
The issue that we face is that I'll go back to it, is used and consumed. We work to timeframes that most people just don't work to. It's crazy, quite frankly. And so what's really difficult is culturally embedding. You guys were talking about it, the education of, I likened it to health and safety for us is really, really important and has to be signed off on anywhere that we go or anything that we do. So sustainability should be the same. It should be as embedded in the cultural processes of our productions as health and safety is or risk assessments are, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right? So it feels like we need to find a way to close that gap, and we are making the small changes. We're using service providers that have green certification. We're doing all of those things, but it is the bigger things, the bigger hitters that feel harder to achieve. And I guess that's what I'm trying to point out is that I can say and do as much as I can, but until I can change the cultural understanding and close the gap,
it's top
hard.
down.
Yes, exactly.
It has to be top down.
Yeah, and the
So
money
business
has to be there
recognise that.
to help. And
Yeah.
what we're seeing in production is a reduction in budgets. It's not an increase in budgets.
Yeah.
And actually, sorry, soapbox.
Don't worry, honestly, don't worry.
This is why they don't invite me.
Likewise, it's fine.
When you're talking, for us, we're banded. When talking band for production, there is far more scope to include wonderful sustainable features. But when you work in the area that I do, which is band 2, it's every penny, every pound, every we're pinching all the time. We're stealing from Paul to pay Peter every day. So it's like that's what I want to start seeing more conversation about is how we're going to close that gap, because until we talk about it and until we actually implement it, we're just talking. We're not doing.
I think somewhere in that discussion you mentioned about, was it not being listened to or something, or a gap or something between what people are saying and what you think should be happening. So it's really interesting. Culture's one of the most difficult things to change in an organisation, but it has to start with the person at the top, generally. Not always, but it has to. It's such a difficult. And how the person at the top behaves, what he says and what he does, and who sees him, are all extremely important things. Yeah. So I've worked in companies where it's not like that, and you feel you're being ignored. We have a thing, it's like voice of the employee, but we call it the voice of the member. What are they saying? What are they actually saying? Yeah. When I recruit people, the first thing they say in recruitment is, what's your environmental credentials? Virtually everyone, every university recruit we do, it's all about sustainability in the environment and work-life balance practices. That's what they want. So if they want that, you have to facilitate to give them something like that. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult to retain people, motivate people, because what you may say, and this may be a little bit where greenwashing may come, is not what people feel might be happening. But it's a very, very difficult thing, but it relies on everyone's daily interaction with each other. But it starts at the top. And if you really see behaviour change, you'll see someone changing it at the top, and it'll cascade down.
100%.
And then all the sort of senior managers will start changing their behaviours. And whether it's safety or something, whatever it is, you'll see a behaviour. And it can take years to do, but eventually you'll end up, you look back and think, my God, we're a completely different company than what we were 10
I'll be
years
honest,
ago.
I don't
It
think
does
I'm
start at
waiting
top.
for the top, though.
No, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You can do it at
Yeah, that's
any
what I'm
level.
saying. I think we're doing it all across.
You don't have to
and-
do it at the top.
I think
of
it is
spread
the whole
that.
culture. So
Yeah.
basically, don't stop talking.
Don't
Keep
stop
going.
talking, yeah.
All right,
Did you
we
feel you're
could-
being... Sorry, did you feel you're being... Is the pressure to be sustainable being put onto you from above? So basically, like you said, you didn't want to put the pressure onto your suppliers to change across to EV and things like this. Is that coming from above? Because that's like you say, that's cultural. That has to change at the top
Like, God. Look, I'm like just so you all know, I'm part of the ITV Green Team with Phil. So this is and Alice and quite a few people in this room. So I work for a company where I am reporting back on how we can be more sustainable, and it is my role to try and implement that sustainability across our productions. That's one of my umbrella areas, and so it's not pressure. I want to do it, but I also have to acknowledge that because we are not the company providing there isn't a budget within our company to provide greener, sustainable aspects that I can deploy to help freelancers, for example, with migrating over to an EV vehicle or trying to stimulate them to do that. I can phone up a studio and I can say, hey, Bottle Yard, please could you install EV charging points? That would be fantastic. But whether they do that or not is out of my remit. And so I am hamstrung to a degree in how much influence I can exert. I can ask the questions, I can make suggestions, but I can't ask a freelancer to spend £70,000 on a Tesla to replace his £70,000 diesel engine Mercedes. I can suggest it, but I can't say you have to do that. And I don't think in a freelance environment, giving somebody who owns a Tesla a financial incentive by giving them a bump on their daily hire rate because they are driving an EV vehicle is democratic. And I think that we need to talk about that. Like how do we do it?
I think that crosses everything we've spoken about, really.
Absolutely.
It touches on an element of everything that's been spoken about, from legislation to culture to everything, really. So you're prime example of that, then.
This could carry on. You want to say something?
He's the sponsor. You've got to let him
It's
talk.
not his sponsor, it's his event, apparently. Okay.
So here's the problems that we found. It's not the chaps at the top or the girls at the top or whatever. It's the gaffers. And the gaffers, if we're just talking about generators and all the rest, the gaffers are a nightmare. They're set in their ways, they've got their generators. And we have come across hire company upon hire company who do not want to replace or become part of the battery or HVO or whatever battery ownership. They want to, basically keep their generators going forever and ever and for as long as possible. So this is where it comes down to production, to actually shout and scream or ask or be polite, whatever the heck, and say, no, I don't want petrol diesel generators. I don't want them near the set. And we take it from there. That's the first thing that we've realized is a nightmare. So getting, at the start when we started this journey 3 years ago, it was really incredible. It was a very difficult hurdle to get over. The next one that we've got is finance. We had the writer strike. That was a curse to everyone, and it was just a nightmare. But it was to us in the company, we found it a great time to actually regenerate and refocus and relook at things and try and get out there. But the thing is that every hire company, production company, they had a nightmare. Fellas were, cameramen, camerawomen were having a terrible time. So what we did is we got involved with finance companies to actually work out a payment scheme. Instead of having to cough out 10 grand or whatever, they're coughing out 150 quid a month over 3 years or whatever. And this is, again, help that people need to be educated with. So getting the studios to actually do certain things like bring in EV car chargers. There's one particular studio that has solar panels on the roof of each stage, but no EV car charging points.
But just to go back on that, and I think you, Frank, said to me, there is a perception because of lack of education of just how much things cost. So you've said a generator sitting in there, they want that running forever because fundamentally they've sunk the cost. But if you can prove to them that actually that generator, let's say the goat, will wash its face in a year and a half because fundamentally it will be exactly the same and it will bring benefit after that, both health and safety wise and also economic wise and environmental wise, that changes the conversation. And I don't think we have that conversation, because what we have a conversation about is we want you to buy a battery. I don't want to buy a battery, I've got a generator. You don't have a conversation which is actually I guarantee you'll be better off in a year and a half's time, and here's the facts. If you don't, I'll give you the money. But fundamentally, the education needs to come in. So I think, you know, more I think about, obviously, this technology is what's the reason to do it opposed to what's the reason not to do it. And I think we need to educate people to tell them that actually there is 3 reasons why this will be better for you. And just keeping using that diesel generator may seem like you're saving, but long term, you're not. And this, I can prove it. So I think we've all talked about it. It's like, you know, somebody goes out in their EV car today, it's very cold outside, it said it was 200 miles on the range, it's now 70 miles on the range. It's like, we've got to be honest with people where it's good, we've got to be honest with people where it's not so good, and just have an honest conversation and make people realise it's just part of what we do.
And you can have those honest conversations, because I am going to call time now. So you can have more honest conversations one-on-one with this esteemed panel. But I would like to say thank you very much in the time-honoured condition of claps.